Zach, we are back and we are talking how to rebuild in the offseason. And to be quite frank, we're going to take you right through our process of when we get one of our roster reviews, how we look at these teams, how we attack a rebuild, what we're focusing on, so on and so forth. So if you want to get in on the roster review action, check out the YouTube description box below or the pinned comment to find out how to do so. And if you want to get daily advice on how to improve your team, check out patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. Get in on that 7-day free trial to get in there and see how you feel about the Discord, so on and so forth. Check out some bonus podcasts while you're there as well. But with all that said, before we dive into it, make sure you're liking the video, leaving a comment. Tell us how you attack the start of your rebuild, specifically in the offseason. With all that said, all the promo in the books, we're going to get right to it. Zach, first and foremost, I want to hear just your opening process. When you get a orphan team or you're looking at a rebuild, you're looking at one of these roster reviews, what are your first thoughts before we get into the step-by-step instructions that we go through when we're looking at these roster reviews?
Well, I think, managing expectations is really good, a very good process when picking up an orphan team. And it's the reason why I love orphan teams, because they're not a quick fix usually. Sure. It's usually a process that takes minimum 1, usually 2, sometimes even 3 years. And I have seen teams take over an orphan team and win in the first year. I've seen it. It's possible. But it's important to understand that that is not the expectation, that this is a process, and it's typically what I would consider a 2-year process at getting this roster to, and this is the phrase that I use, make the team in my own image. And that's going to take some time. So just managing expectations, knowing that this is not going to be quick usually, and knowing that you're either going to have old players, no draft picks, or both when you take over an orphan team is usually a good place to start.
We go into a rebuild, and not even just specifically an orphan, a dynasty orphan, which oddly enough, we do have a dynasty orphanage in our Discord. If you want to pick up an orphan team, look no further. You can get in an orphan league today, get in that Discord today, and you can do that no problem. I promise there's a league in there kicking around or a team there kicking around. But, even if you're just looking at it from, hey, man, I just haven't been able to get this team going. I need to evaluate my process. I need to evaluate this team build, whatever it is. The second you're in a rebuild, having that expectation of this is going to take time and being able to, something we talked about a lot, being able to commit to that time, because it's so rare that you'll turn around in 1 year. I've done it on occasion, but I'm not going to act like that's the rule that, if you do everything just like this, it's going to happen. Had a lot of things break right for me. Had a lot of draft picks break right for me. Had a lot of players that I was able to pick up in trades I probably shouldn't have been able to, just by dumb value, players coming off injury, whatever the case was. A lot of things broke right. And I think always, or most of the time, having that conservative mindset in mind of just saying, giving yourself the time to take more time, as opposed to trying to rush it, because one of the worst things you can do to rebuild, and we've talked about this in a lot of our mistakes, talking about rebuilding, is rushing the rebuild and trying to come out of it too soon, half-cocked, before you're really set, before you have your legs under you. That's a good way usually to end up in a much longer rebuild, or just, the first year or two was all for naught. So that's the last thing we want to do. We want to get in the rebuild, commit to it. And I think one of the things to just take that breath, take that time, especially if you're diving into a brand new league. There's a lot to take into consideration.
One other thing I will add there, Bob, before we get into the step-by-step process, is I like to do a little investigation into the league, because I never just, I'm in. I need to make sure that the league is active, because I'm taking over a team that I didn't make that's probably in a bad position. It's very easy to do this. If you go to Sleeper, you go to the league tab, and you go to, I think it's like transactions, and then you filter transactions to trades, and it will show you the total number of trades made throughout the entire dynasty season. Whenever the league was renewed until the league either was not renewed or was renewed to the following year, you will see an entire year's worth of trades. And if you see a short list of trades, that to me tells me that that league is not active. And what I'm trying to avoid is, committing, like you said, committing myself to a 2 or 3 year build, and then having to do that with my hands tied behind my back because the league doesn't make moves. I have left orphans after 2 or 3 years in better positions than I took them, because I cannot get enough activity. My process can be soundproof, but I am only as good as the moves I am able to make. And if the league is not active, I'm not able to get this team in my own image. So it's, for me, a really big part of this process is investigating the league and making sure that this league is active. It doesn't have to be active year round, but that there are trades. If you look at the trades and from September to December, there's only 3, that's bad. If you're mid-season and there's only 3 or 4 or 5 single-digit trades, that's a bad sign. So definitely do your homework on the league before committing to join it, because like Bob said, this is a 2-3 year commitment to get this team back to being competitive.
Yeah, I think I love that point, Zach. And I think just even, looking at it from a multifaceted perspective, you might not be the most active trader. So seeing, 50 trades in a year or more might be intimidating to you, and maybe you want to test yourself, push yourself to be more experienced, whatever the case is. But that is a great way to, bring up transactions, to look at the league chat, because you can get in on all of this and see all of this before you even join the league. Just something to think about, more things to, make sure you're getting into a league that you're going to enjoy. At minimum, if you're not going to enjoy winning throughout that entire process, because it is fun rebuilding. We both love the rebuild process in general, but if you're not having fun being able to send trades, or you're sending trades that you're just never going to get a response back from, I know for me that would be a lot less fun, because like you said, you have your hands tied behind your back, and it's like, well, how fast can I rebuild this thing if I'm just working with picks? This team is that bad. I need picks, and I need to move players I have that are not good for this team for picks. So that's a great point, Zach, to investigate the league you're jumping into before you do that. Speaking on this point, I'll even, kind of roll this in. Maybe you're in the league already, you just decided to rebuild, whatever the case is. The first thing we do when we're looking at roster reviews, or when we're taking over our own orphan team, we want to analyze the league setup by scoring, number of teams, roster size, number of starters, etc. The whole nine, as much as we can get info on this league as we can. Like you said, do your investigation, and maybe that by this point you've kind of decided to commit to the league already, whatever the case is. If you don't like Superflex, don't join a Superflex league unless you're looking to try it out. Same with one quarterback. Don't join leagues that aren't your flavor. But the one thing I want to look at when I see these settings, the league setup, the settings, etc., what do these emphasize? Something we talk about a lot in these roster reviews is every roster setting that's out there, league size, scoring settings, whether it's PPR, 0.5 standard, whether it's tight end premium, how many teams are in the league, the roster size in general, the number of starters, especially roster size compared to the number of starters, etc. All of these create emphases in the league, whatever the case is. So, do larger starting rosters emphasize more starting depth? Do smaller ones emphasize higher end starters and less need for depth? Superflex and tight end premium obviously make quarterbacks and tight ends more valuable. PPR tends to make wide receivers that much more of a focal point in your team build. Whereas a lack of PPR scoring, whether it's, PPR or dialed back to 0.5 or even just standard, puts that much more of an emphasis on running back scoring. Does that league have the large bench size, making waivers pretty desolate? We're in a league like that. Not a lot going on for waivers. There's some goodies out there from time to time, but not that much. Or is it a pretty short bench? And this makes waivers more viable and the need for starting depth that much less, where you can kind of consolidate your roster into starters and just kind of feed off waiver depth from time to time. Every league is different, and we're not here to league shame. We're here to help you win in your league. That's what we're here to do. And so being able to understand these league dynamics, answer these questions, all that will help you get the most out of your league settings and kind of give you a roadmap to how to build your roster going forward, and ultimately answer the question, how does your team fit into these dynamics? Zach, I want to hear from you. We've talked about this ad nauseum over time, but we want to let the people know again our thought process here as we, take on these roster reviews, take on new teams ourselves, and so on. What do you got?
Yeah, the point that I really like here is taking a deep look at the league scorings. Is there an edge that you can get somewhere? And typically the way I find this is if there is a very high tight end premium. I don't know why leagues, they understand it's tight end premium, but if it's if it's 0.75 or even 1 point, like we are, we're in a full point tight end premium league, which means tight ends get 2 points per catch. Those are typically settings that league mates don't remember. It really tips the scales for tight ends if it's a 2 PPR league for tight ends or 0.75. So these things really matter, because a lot of times people, they think tight end premium, it's a half point, which is the more common thing. But I'm really looking at what scoring settings, if any, can I take advantage of. There are some leagues where players get a point for a first down, or they get 0.1 points per carry. Okay, well, is there a high volume running back that I can try and trade for? So on and so forth. Where are the things that I can take advantage of, whether it's in the long term or whether it's in the short term? Maybe I can buy this player at a lower price than I should be able to flip them during the season, so on and so forth. So, this goes back into what we talked about prior to step one, is really doing some homework on the league and knowing how you can take advantage of things to whereas other people aren't so much paying attention. This isn't news to anyone, but something I've really been focusing on is adding fab to my trades. Can I take advantage of if I have a shallower bench? And fab is very necessary to add waiver wire players here, because there aren't deep benches. There are players available prior to the season, during the season, so on and so forth. But definitely these points here, knowing how you can analyze the league beyond this, is it active or not? But is it, like you said, the scoring? Does it favor this? Does it favor that? Does it have a large bench? Does it have a short bench? These are ways that when you do them all right, they're going to add up to make a difference. None of these are like, oh, this is going to win me a game. But if you start to incorporate these into your everyday antics, your every week antics, however you approach your dynasty leagues, they are going to make you that much better, because you're hyper focusing on other areas that other people aren't. They're just looking, oh, Christian McCaffrey, I want that. Well, maybe I can get a Rachaad White, who is a little bit less efficient, but has a lot of volume. This league is point for first downs, so on and so forth. These are just random examples I'm coming up with at the top of my head. But doing some extra research, I talked about it before, doing some homework on the league. This is really important, because when you take over an orphan, Bob, it's designed for you to not succeed. You are already swimming against the current. So now you got to find ways to make up some ground to get your team, I don't want to call it 500, but get your team from a below average team to a mid team to then be a competitive team. So this kind of homework, this preparation, these kinds of analyzations of your league mates, the league scoring, so on and so forth, are just going to make you that much better if you can find out a way to incorporate it all together.
Yeah, I love how you mentioned that. No one of these points is a silver bullet to win your league, but it's one of those things that all of these inches add up to make a mile. When you put in all of these little bits of work here and there over the course of time, like you said, all that, whatever antics you work these into your daily antics, your daily efforts, it adds up over time. The power of compounding consistency. We've talked about that on the channel as well. And you brought up, adding fab into your deals, knowing how the waivers work. Is it waiver priority? So if you get to the top, is it worth holding onto that top spot for when, a big name pops off? Or is it fab? Is it worth adding fab into all your deals? And a big thing, if you're going into a rebuild that we completely neglected or forgot to mention at this point, knowing how the draft order is determined. Because if it's determined by record versus max points, how you kind of go about tanking, for a higher pick, when you start your rebuild, a little bit of a different process. How, ultimately we want to get points off our team that aren't helping us now, but it does kind of just change the dynamic of how you end up getting better picks, or how, if at all, you can get better picks on your roster. With that process of knowing how the draft order is determined. Is it a lottery system? Is it purely max points for? Whatever the case is, knowing how it works gives you ammo to get over the hump later. Moving into point number 2, and this is real simple, but it's going to give you a bit of a measuring stick. We talked about inches adding up to miles before. This is going to give you kind of a measuring stick to see where you're at as a team. And what I want you to do, take that team you have, whether you're just signing up for a new orphan team, whether it's you're coming into your team and saying, man, I need to rebuild and see where I'm at. Right now is a great time to just try setting your most competitive lineup you can. because if you can't do it in the offseason, projecting ahead for what you're looking at in the regular season, and I know there's a draft to have happen, a free agency to have happen in between now and then where a lot of spots are going to get juggled around, but this can kind of help you determine where you're at. And I think one of the things that people need to realize is, when people go into a rebuild, they need to understand that not all rebuilds need to be complete teardowns. A lot of people, when they go to start a rebuild, they just say, hey, I'm in the league. Maybe I'm new as a orphan takeover, whatever the case is, or hey, I've been here for 2 years, but I'm finally going to get my act together. Everybody's for sale, whatever the case may be, and just kind of let the offers flood in. And I'll touch on this later, but when I'm jumping into a rebuild, whether I'm, taking over an orphan, whether I'm looking at a roster review, I want to look inward first and see what I have going on my team, what I can control the controllables, and then look outward from there. And, not to discredit the idea of saying, hey, everybody's for sale, see y'all later. That could be the move in some leagues. I'm not saying it's not, but let's go through the right process before we just go to that, before we commit to that multi-year rebuild when it could just be completed in this offseason plus a season. And then in 2025, we're already looking to compete again, as opposed to if we sell everything, we're probably looking at 26 realistically. So that's, some people might not want to donate to the league for that long, but so take the time, try setting your best lineup you can. And fun fact, you can do this anytime. You can do this in season, out of season, after a draft. This just gives you a good opportunity to see where you kind of stack up in the league. And I know it's, tough because not everybody in the league is going to be setting their lineups like this in the offseason. I've done it in the past where I take everybody out of my starting lineup, or I just put in the players that I'm guaranteed building around, whatever the case may be. People are frustrating like that. They might not be as, cooperative to this mindset, but either which way, you can kind of see how far you are from having a really good starting lineup. My biggest bit of advice when you go to set this lineup, be picky and don't have the best possible outcome in mind for every single player. Because if you go in with all of the Zamir Whites of the world and Kendre Miller, as much as we like Kendre Miller, and put on the expectation that, the backfield is all theirs next season, baby, and they're your running back 1 and 2 next year, you're opening yourself up to some disappointment and, could end up pushing you in the wrong direction when you might be supposed to be heading towards a rebuild, but you're like, oh, I got these two guys chucking in and these rookie wide receivers from last year who are going to pick things up and be wide receiver ones this year. So my biggest bet, be a little conservative with that, be picky who gets in your lineup, and anybody who you don't feel confident starting right now in a lineup, don't put them in your lineup. Don't slot them in. Take them out, leave them out. It's okay to leave holes because that's kind of what we were trying to determine, how many holes we need to fill before we can get to that true blue lineup that we can start trotting out as a competitive team. The farther we are from that, the further we are from the end of our rebuild. But this process should help you determine whether you need to rebuild, retool, and give you an idea of how long the process should take versus just, I'm just going to sell everybody. Zach, love to hear your thoughts on this concept of how we're kind of starting off the rebuild process, I guess, when we're first taking a real big look at the team. What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, for this point, what I need to know is my window. When am I trying to compete by? Because, and I'm a big fan. The thing I will say is I love to set a lineup. Don't leave it up. Because, hypothetically speaking, you've got one quarterback, one running back, 2 wide receivers, and nobody else set in your lineup. Then everybody else knows if they go to your team that everybody who's not in your starting lineup is not as valuable to you as the players that are in your starting lineup. So therefore, maybe they think they can buy them lower. Sometimes I'll throw players in my starting lineup that I really don't have any intention of starting. But I do this. I do set my lineup as if I had a game today, and I take like a mental snapshot of that, or I'll even take an actual snapshot and be like, this is my projected line. These are guys I feel safe starting moving forward, or that I feel good about building around 2 years from now. I need to get another wide receiver, another tight end, another running back, 2 more flex spots, and a super flex spot. And that's how I start this process. I'm a big fan. Like I talked about this a few weeks ago. I don't like the whole, you don't have to set a lineup thing. Like I love setting a lineup, and seeing how I stack up. This is, to me, something that really, I start to visualize my team. I start to get excited about my team. And it's like you said, last year I was doing this with Kendre Miller, even though I didn't project. I never, ever, ever came on Dynasty Rewind and said, I'm expecting things from Kendre Miller in 2023. I never expected that. I said, I'm getting Kendre Miller now because I'm thinking in 2024, he's a bigger part of that offense. And so that's what I was doing in 2023 is putting Kendre Miller in that lineup. Or I would leave Kendre Miller out of the lineup and say, if this guy takes the next step, I have another running back. But I still need another running back, just like you said. Don't plan for this guy to be your. Right now, we could talk about Kendre Miller, Tajay Spears, Chase Brown as guys that, hey, these guys could be running backs. But then they could go draft another running back. They could Zach Charbonnet themselves. And now you're in like a what kind of a spot. So I love this idea of putting your best foot forward, at least mentally, and seeing how your team stacks up, because now you start to visualize, what areas do I need to attack? What pieces can I use for trades? Even if they're not in your lineup, there's still things that you need to do something with. You need to trade these players. So I'm a big fan of this. I love this point. I do it in every one of my leagues. But again, I think it's really important. Don't leave that lineup up. Don't let people know who you think is valuable to you and who you think is not. Because at any time someone comes barking for a player of mine, I'm like, oh man, I really like him. That's my first line. You did it with Roschon Johnson. I was like, oh man, Roschon, Bears running back of the future. So it's you have to maintain every bit of value that you can on your roster. And so by leaving up a projected starting lineup, that's to me like no, don't do that. Don't let people know. Mess around with it and then throw people into the lineup just to mess with it. But I love this point. I love visualize where you're at, what you need, and how long it's going to take you to get there. Because for the most part, you're not going to be competitive in the first year. So I need something to get excited about. And seeing how I've got 5 or 6 or 7 starters, but when I took this over a week ago, I only had 4. So I've done some good work in here. Visualize. They say like success, you got to visualize it. It's all mental. It's the same thing in Dynasty, man. You got to see the path that you've come from and where you're going and how you're going to get there. And so literally setting a lineup, even for 30 minutes, an hour, taking a screenshot of it and looking at it when you're, hey, I have this. It does help me out. Dynasty is a very mental and psychological thing. There are a lot of aspects of this game that we play that are psychological and how you can get an advantage. And to me, seeing how far I've come from when I took over an orphan or seeing how far I have to go are things that really help me out in framing my orphan teams.
I think I love this point too, because you touch on something that I briefly glanced over with. You're probably not going to win a lot of games year 1 and 2. So, or at least year 1, whatever the case is, you're not going to win a lot early is the best way to say that. And I think one of the best ways you can kind of keep yourself motivated is by taking that screenshot of, hey, I took this team over day 1. This is what it was. Now it's this. And I have all these draft capital assets to move along with it, to keep it going, whatever the case is, or I have all these other assets I didn't have before, whatever it is. Any bit of progress that you can note for yourself to take with you for the future, 100% recommend, because it's going to help you stay motivated, keep on top of the rebuild. The money will too, but all of the other things, keeping that mental aspect going, it's all good help and a good way to keep you motivated. And this all kind of boils into this next point, now really taking a look at this team that much more, taking inventory of the assets we have. And not only inventory, because obviously we can look and see, I have 26 players on a 26-man roster, and I have all 4 of my draft picks for this season. Dope. Great. I'm in a good spot. But what I'm actually talking about is going in depth and peeling this back that much further. So maybe we have an idea of where this team is going and how quick it's getting there. Maybe we don't yet. Maybe we'll get to that in the next point. I promise we will. But questions I'm asking myself, and there's a lot of questions I'm asking myself in this segment, probably maybe more than any other segment, is, what players do we have on this team that fit the course of our rebuild and that we want to build around? You've touched on it before beautifully. It's like choose players that you want to build around, whatever the reason may be. Maybe you just really like how a player performs. Maybe you like that you were able to get him in the first trade of this rebuild, and there's some nostalgia there, and he's scoring more points than you got him value-wise for. I know both you and I will always have a very soft spot for Amon-Ra St. Brown because you bought him very cheaply in one of your rebuilds, and I got him very cheaply in one of mine. And then immediately, when everybody thought that, oh, he's gonna go back to a pumpkin the next season because all these healthy pieces are coming back, he's like, F that, I'm gonna be a top 5 wide receiver in the league. I know that I will always have a soft spot for that player in my roster, and especially on the team that I got him on specifically before that build happened. I know that. And so build around players that you want to build around, but also then ask the questions going further in your taking inventory process. Who doesn't fit our rebuild that we can get good value for right now in a trade? Guys that are a little older, but not like so old that they're on the age cusp of like people feeling that they're going to be decrepit and useless next year. Save those guys to trade for later. And that's the next question. Who might we have to wait on to sell until their value comes back around? Wide receivers in that 29 to 30 range, running backs in the 27 to range, or free agents too. Could be guys that might need to wait until Aaron Jones is probably a prime example. If he goes anywhere, Josh Jacobs probably a good example. Saquon Barkley, another good example. Guys that are going to be free agent market guys, possibly, even though it sounds like Aaron Jones is probably staying in Green Bay now. Who knows? We'll see if that sticks. But besides the point, not we're discussing at this moment, but just an example. And then further inventory, how well are we set up for this upcoming draft? How well are we set up for future drafts? Do we have at least our bare minimum draft capital? And maybe that's something you look at before you even join the league. How well are you set on draft capital for the future? Or are you just SOL on picks? Did the team that was in before you just really go all in, not get anything for it, and just say, well, all right, I won, see you later? That might suck. That might be where you're at. If that is the case, how are we going to get more picks on this team? But ultimately, we want to answer the question, how are we going to go about this rebuild? Do we have to build through the draft because we only have picks, we don't really have players to trade? Or can we maintain some of our starting rosters so we don't have to build? We can kind of piece in pieces as we go. We don't have to start from zero, like trading everybody away like we did before. Or do we really need to turn into a trading machine? And now then the question becomes too, working along with your strengths, because if you're not a good trader, might not be the best move for you. Maybe you're a good drafter and you can really do something with your picks. Who knows? Something that might help with that. Getting in the community, not saying ours, but there are communities out there where you can drop questions and ask, how to attack your team build. Same question that day. Patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. Get an our 7-day free trial. You can try this out right now. But Zach, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one. Taking inventory of the assets we have at the moment. What do you got?
The point here, Bob, that I really want to harp on is you did mention the line, how well are we set up for future drafts? The first thing to do really is, are you able to be set up for the current draft? You mentioned typically a team you take over is void of picks because a team went in or they made bad trades and you don't really have picks. Well, is there another team in the league that has 17 draft picks? They're probably not trading for your Mike Evans and Nick Chubbs. So is it now time for you to make more moves for 2025 picks? It's really important to make sure that if you want to get 2024 picks, you're able to get 2024 picks. But you got to take inventory of what you have and can you, flip it for draft picks or younger players. And that's where it comes in. And we're going to talk about these points in a little bit. I don't want to spoiler alert Bob's other points here or my other points here. But I usually hyper focus on 1 year of draft picks. And if I'm taking over an orphan team, I'm going to use our timeline right now. And if you're watching this video a year from now, relate it to your current year. If I'm taking an orphan team over in the offseason of 2024, I'm not usually targeting 2024 draft picks. They're very expensive. Mm-hmm. And listen, most orphans are going to fit this category that we're talking about. Some of them you can win now, you can make moves. That's not who I'm talking about here. I'm usually punting year one, whether it's a startup or an orphan. And so do I want to draft points right now? or would I rather make trades for the future draft picks and have a better draft pick of my own because I'm not scoring points? You know what I'm saying? It's a really big picture there, but you have to make sure that you're taking inventory of what you have. What value does it have? What value does it have to you? What value does it have to your league mates? And the way that I usually apply this is, how can I turn this into 2025 assets or the next year from now? Because it depends when you're watching this video. How can I turn what I have now into assets that work for my timeline? And that's something, again, we're going to talk about this in points 4 and 5, but I'm not usually trading for current draft picks just because of their cost in the offseason. They're most valuable now, and they don't stop increasing in value until we get to the day after the rookie draft. Then next year's picks gain value. So can I trade lower for 2025 or even 2026 picks right now?
Yeah, I love this point, Zach, because you nailed it, where it's a picks market right now. So if you're trying to get in on picks for this draft, you're probably going to have to pay more than you would if you just targeted next year. So I think there's nothing wrong with evaluating your situation. If where you're at is where you're at, that you don't have a lot going on this year, you can't add more capital, and we'll talk about this later. You know, it's okay to move on to next year, to kind of punt this year rookie draft wise, and that sucks. It does, but you know, it's about playing with the hand you're dealt, not stacking the deck at this point for yourself. You got to, like I said, if you're dealt a bad hand, it is what it is. You got to make the most of what you got. But with that in mind, let's talk about step number 4. Let's get into it. And this is something, if we haven't done it already, we definitely need to establish it at this point. So if we haven't already defined our team's trajectory and start road mapping a list of team needs to get us from point A, which is where we're at, to point C, that eventual championship. See what I did there? And a big part of this is, in order to make truly smart moves, we need to understand where our team is at this moment. How far are we away from turning the corner? If we're looking to acquire players, hopefully we're acquiring those players that we expect to outlast the rebuild, as opposed to not lasting the rebuild. And the best rule of thumb, boilerplate here, when we're just targeting positions in a rebuild, the best position to focus on last, always go running back last. Figure out running back last. It's far too much of a volatile landscape right now to even think about what any running back is going to be doing 2 to 3 years from now. So it's hard enough for anybody, but running backs especially. Zach, feel free to touch on this point before we dive on into the next one.
This is probably one of the most important points here, Bob. And, you know, we talked about it before in point number 3, but how I want to make sure we re-highlight here is your timeline realistic, right? If I'm trying to compete in 2025 and my previous team's owner traded my first and second round picks, can I get 2025 first round picks? Or is there already a team that has 3 or 4 of them that's doing what I'm doing, but is a year or 2 ahead of me? Well, I need to change my timeline then, because I'm not getting those 2025 picks. This guy has no intention of dealing those picks unless you strike up a conversation and say, hey, are these picks available? Are you looking to make moves in the 2024 draft, or are you trying to buy? I have Kyron Williams, or I have CMC, or there's a player on my team I'm not interested in hanging on to. Why? Because they don't fit the timeline of my build, like Bob just said. So knowing your team trajectories, but knowing if it's realistic or not, is very important. And I love the point that you said there. I mean, if you don't know to buy running backs last now, unless your league is like standard scoring or whatever it may be that favors running backs, don't target running backs. You know, if I am buying running backs, it's at a cheap cost, and because I'm hoping that they play better than their ADP or their value now, so I can flip in a year from now. Because a running back's value today is not a running back's value tomorrow, unless it's a CMC or a Breece Hall. And at this point, we could probably put Jameer Gibbs in there, maybe Travis Etienne. There's like 4 or 5 running backs you can put in that conversation. Everybody else, it's a year-to-year game at running back position. So love this point. Know if your timeline is realistic, you know, depending on your league circumstances. Again, is there somebody rebuilding in your time frame that is going to prevent you from realistically hitting that target? And also, you know, knowing which players to target. The way I like to do that real quick, Bob, is just like, hey, maybe I should just build one position. Boom, I got my wide receivers. Let's look at quarterbacks and tight ends. Boom, I got a quarterback. I got a tight end. I'll get another one in next year's draft. And running backs is honestly, I won my biggest leagues championship playing running back 0 this year. Like I did have Kyron on the team. I traded for Kyron midseason, but my best running back all season long was Brian Robinson until Kyron came back week 12 or 13 because I bought Kyron when he had the injury. So it's possible. Like my wide receivers were Amon-Ra St. Brown, Chris Olave, Tyreek Hill. I had Hawkins. So if you build around that, it's very possible to win. But love this point. And it's really, really important to know if your time frame is realistic. And that is not dependent on you. It's dependent on the rest of your league. And we've talked about that a couple times already.
And I think it could be dependent on you and how aggressive you choose to be. You know, the more you're in there and more focusing on the league and how to build your roster and things of that sort, naturally your rebuild is probably going to go a little bit faster. I don't know that it's, complete in a whole year's time, unless you're really, working at it faster. But I really like the point you brought up with acknowledging another rebuilding team who has picks in the future, who you might still want to strike up a conversation with in a way that you could expedite their rebuild. Because if they have a 25 first that they're not looking to move, maybe after the season, they're sniffing around and they're thinking, I might be able to come out of this a little sooner than I thought. They've already made it through the season. They have their number one pick or whatever pick they have is early, but they have other picks to trade. Maybe that's when you go to them with Kyron and be like, hey, and it's a little later than we'd like to, but if that's when you're going to get best value for him, it is what it is, whatever the case is, or any player that maybe pops up. Hey, let me help you. You're looking to come out of this maybe earlier than you thought. Here's a player for you to, chuck into your lineup next season when you're looking to push now. Whatever the case may be, it's just a nice way to think about it where if you're operating on the altruistic idea that you're helping a team come out of their rebuild earlier, that might help you get a trade done. But ultimately with this concept, knowing your trajectory is so important because how many times have we seen it where there's teams out there that are just making moves that, what are you doing? Like you're a clear rebuild, you're a clear competitor, maybe even, and you're selling super competitive pieces for just draft capital, or you're selling, younger assets for older assets when you're in a rebuild, whatever the case may be. So this, and then abiding by the rule you set when you set that trajectory, anybody who doesn't fit that ethos of thought, off your board, off your trade board, as they say. Maybe somebody might say that, probably not, but maybe they will now. But let's talk about step 5. And this is one that I think plays in well with something you love to do with the league. You like to, be very active, vocal in the league. And before you go send an offer, you like to take inventory of the rest of the league and seek out potential trade partners based off of symbiotic relationships in which trades make sense for both parties. As in, like normal people might say, I'm a rebuilder. This team's competitive. Can I make a deal where I send them a Mike Evans, a Keenan Allen, a Stephon Diggs for decent enough draft capital? Can I make some of those deals happen? Makes sense for you, makes sense for me. You're getting rid of rookie picks that probably aren't going to help you as much this year as those aging vets are. And I'm getting those, older players off my roster before they die on my roster, before their value dies on my roster. One of the biggest concepts I talk about in my trading guide, you can check that out in the YouTube description box below. I talk through the concept of creating trades that actually get accepted. And a massive starting point with these is finding needs and goals that coincide in opposite directions. Basically, like I just said, I'm rebuilding, trading with this competitive team, or I'm competitive, trading with a rebuilding team. There's just a nice symbiotic relationship there. And you can definitely create trades with similar trajectory teams, just a little less likely because there's little sense for a rebuilding team outside of maybe I have a ton of wide receivers, but no tight end. That team has no tight end, or I'm sorry, that team has a bunch of tight ends, but no wideouts. Maybe we can make something happen where we help each other out. So there's still a symbiotic relationship to be had there. But either which way, the odds of completing a trade just goes up dramatically when you're working with someone on a trajectory different from your own. Zach, talk about it. Talk about how you're taking inventory of the rest of the league and striking up some trade offers.
Well, I'm going to approach this from the opposite angle here real quick. There are two types of owners that I don't want to deal with. and it's the owner that doesn't send me an offer that makes sense. And I'm also talking about when I first joined the league, I introduce myself, send a funny GIF. This is what I'm interested in doing. Everybody knows it. I'm not afraid of everybody knowing it because I don't want people to waste my time, and I'm going to talk about that right now. Somebody sending me an offer that makes absolutely no sense for me. Me taking on your dead weight, me taking on late picks, so on and so forth. Or sending me what I call the dummy offer. Let me see how dumb this guy is. Don't send me that because I'm going to immediately engage you in a dialogue and make you explain yourself. Explain how this trade makes sense for me, please. I told you what I'm interested in. Why did you send me Nick Chubb for Kyron Williams? And I'm giving you a 3rd round pick. Can you explain this, please? Can you help me understand where? Oh, I was just seeing. I hate that. I hate that so much. So for me, and how this relates to your point, Bob, is I'm trying to send offers to where, hey, this guy needs a quarterback. Hey, this guy needs a running back. I was in a dialogue before we started recording this video, and the person messaged me, what interests you on my team? And I took a look at their team, and I said, this team is loaded. Where did they finish? And I scrolled down to their draft picks, and all they had was one draft pick. They had the 4-11, and it was their own pick, which means he lost in the championship game, Bob. And so I say to him, I'm rebuilding. You have the firepower to compete. I'm not going to ask for anything on your team. And look, it wasn't like a Jahmyr Gibbs or Bijan Robinson's. It was, CMCs. It was older, like Travis Kelce, so on and so forth.
Sure.
Why am I going to ask for these players when A, it doesn't fit my timeline, but B, it kind of like takes away from what this owner is clearly trying to do. They're on the precipice of a championship. They were right there last year. And I said that to him. I said, the only thing I'm really interested in is your future picks. And I tried to say, you have the firepower to compete. I don't. I don't see any reason for me to trade for any of your players. And I mean that respectfully. I don't mean that disrespectfully. Like, I don't want any of your players. No, it doesn't make any sense. You can win. How can I help you win is how I approach that conversation.
Sure.
So love this. Taking stock of your league and who's in what position, who's close to winning a championship, who is, the team that's rebuilding that next year, they're definitely in a playoff spot. And they can use a James Conner for cheap, or they can use Christian Kirk, who is, 27 right now, but it's going to be 29, 30 when I'm competitive. So I love this point, Bob, but I make sure to utilize it in a way that is like respectful of my league mates, because that's what I want. I don't want people wasting my time in my inbox with an offer that doesn't make any sense. And I don't want anybody in my inbox sending me an offer to see if I'm a dummy. And I approach other people that way too. I don't want to waste their time because, at the end of the day, we're here for fun and we're here to have a good time. And sometimes I take it personal when I get a really bad offer. I'm like, what is this crap? So I try not to do it. I try not to send those kinds of offers as well. So love this point. This is really important to knowing how you're going to get your team to where you want to be is by understanding your league mates and what they need and where they are in their builds. It's not just you and your build. It's who's in a position to have, we can have a symbiotic relationship. We can help each other out. You help me rebuild. I'll help you compete. How can we do that?
I love that aspect. I love that thought process of just working to make each other better, because that's another concept in the trading guide. It takes two to tango. It takes two to get a deal done, sometimes three, I guess, if you're crazy and working three-way trades. I've never been able to put one together, but I usually don't like what I'm getting out of it. So either which way, takes two to tango. Got to help both teams. Both teams got to be winners at the end of the day. So miss me in the comments when everybody asked, did I win this trade? Did y'all both win that trade? That's what I want to know next time. So that's how I'll be answering those questions from now on too. If anybody asks me, do I win? I'll ask, did you both win? With that said, that rant in the books, moving on to step 6, the 6th thing we're looking to do, start making and receiving offers. Now, this feels maybe like a long way to kind of get to this point. Finally, the exciting part where we start sending more offers and, accepting more, or not necessarily accepting, but receiving offers, kind of saying we're open for business. But My big thing, and I touched on this earlier, I want to sort things out internally. I want to have a good gauge of the emphases, emphasize, whatever is emphasized by the league setup and settings that helps make this league tick. What makes really good teams tick? I want to be in the know on that, whether it's an orphan, whether I'm just, starting to take my team build seriously, whatever the case is. I want to be in tune with that. And I want to do that before I start getting overwhelmed with, receiving or trying to send out offers. But after I have that firm understanding of the league dynamics and how they play out, and I have that firm direction in mind, that game plan in mind of what I need, kind of what I need to get there, how long it's going to take, I'm willing to be a little more aggressive. So aim to acquire players that make sense for our team trajectory, as we mentioned before. Draft capital at fair values if we can get it now in this season still, while people are maybe sleeping on it. I don't want to say that, every league. I know there's leagues out there that dynasty players don't value draft capital as much because they're not proven players. There are a handful, not more than a handful, but there's plenty of people out there with that mindset. And if you can know which people you're dealing with that either value the picks or devalue the picks, whatever it may be, you can still make some deals. And the biggest thing, we're trying to get players off our roster. Don't sell low just to sell low. That you can hold on to the Stephon Diggs, the Mike Evans, the Keenan Allen. Hold on to these guys through the offseason. Wait until they're scoring points again. Then look to flip those guys to competitive team when they need help filling lineup gaps, so on and so forth. But that just goes into, we want to maintain value for the future as much as possible. And we can't do that if we're giving it away because somebody's old and doesn't fit our trajectory anymore. Zach, feel free to touch on this one.
Yeah, this is kind of the culmination, Bob, of all the points that we've talked about. And you definitely don't want to sell low on players. There is a time, I will say, there is a time to sell an Aaron Jones lower than what you should be able to get for Aaron Jones. And that's the end of the season, because you don't know if Aaron Jones is the thing in the future. It could be Leonard Fournette it could be Kareem Hunt. There is a time to sell players low, but it's not at the start of your orphan takeover. And here's why. The first offer you make, I don't want to say it has to be a win for you, but you got to come out looking good. That doesn't mean the other owner doesn't have to come out looking good. But if everybody sees that you're selling a player low, your inbox is about to get flooded with a lot of offers that probably don't help you in the long run. So it's really important to, whether you're sending or whether you're receiving offers, it's not accepting what I would say is less than a player's market value. And how do you determine that value? Discord, Keep Trade Cut, DLF, the community, asking other people what they think, and multiple other people that you trust. Like, I got a couple guys that I know that are friends that they don't win in their leagues, and I know because I'm in with them. I'm not asking them for their advice. I'm asking Bob for his advice. I'm asking people. I'm asking
compliment.
I'm asking. It's true though. Like, do you want to get somebody's advice who doesn't understand proper market value? No, absolutely not. Because typically, when I'm reaching out to somebody, it's because I'm on the fence and I'm uncertain what to do. If I know I don't need your advice, Bob. I'm good. But if I'm not sure, Bob, what do you think about this? So it's really important in those first few offers to make sure that people understand, hey, this guy's he's got a plan. He's sticking to it. He knows which direction he's going. And he's not just taking crap offers just to get these players off their rosters. And trust me, and I'm telling you from experience, if I see someone else in my league take over a team, and I'm like, oh, they did not get good enough value there, where can I come knocking on their door? So it works both ways here, Bob.
That's when you send the dummy offer next, then to gauge, to be the litmus test for them. But
here's the thing: it's not a dummy offer if you just showed everybody that you're taking 75 cents on the dollar.
Yeah,
you told everybody you're doing that. That's what that is. It's the same thing whether you sent the deal or you accepted a deal. That is what you're telling someone. And if it gets accepted, everybody in the league now, it's a public service announcement, man. So everything you do is monitored. That's the way I approach my and that's the way I approach orphan teams that take over in my league. Oh, they did not take a good offer there. Let me see if I can come. We did this the other day when we were doing a video, Bob, and we talked about the Chris Olave trade, and I'm like, well,
Sure.
He accepted 111 for Chris Olave. What can I ask? What can I send for Kyron Williams? Surely I'm not going to send what Kyron Williams is, what I perceive he's worth, because he accepted much less than what Chris Olave is worth. So, yeah, this is really important in terms of like the first few offers, making sure that you're getting good, proper value, so everybody else can see that A, you're not accepting poor offers, but B, you're sticking with a plan, you have a trajectory, and you're taking steps to that as well.
Yeah, I love that. And I think another way you can go about that, you mentioned all the beautiful points, hopping in the Discord, patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. You can do that for free today on me and Zach, or anytime in the near future ever on me and Zach. That free trial will always be there. But that's one way you can do it. Pop in there, ask the Discord what the thoughts are, ask the community, reach out to us, add us in there as well. And another way you can do it for free, nice and easy to kind of get a gauge of how the league may value players and picks. Just look at the trade history again. You maybe popped in there to see how active it is, looking to see some recent trades. And it's going to be hard if they're if there's 6 assets exchanging hands, it's going to be hard to gauge value. But if you see a couple for 1 or 2 and you see, running backs that are, quote unquote washed or older on the aging side going for mid-second round picks, that's probably a good gauge for you saying that, oh, that's probably what they're worth in this league. And maybe you can aim for a little higher than that, whatever the case is, but you get it. That's just one way you can kind of, again, establish values when you haven't been in the league, say it as an orphan, or maybe even just to take an in-depth look on a team you've already had, a rebuild that you're going through, and maybe just say, I need to evaluate, because big secret, every league dynamic is different. And, what is worth 202 in this league might be worth 207 in that league. And now that's a decent gap when you think about how rookie drafts go and things of that sort. Not huge, but it's sizable, it's noticeable. And that's a big difference in return, especially if how you feel about your skill as a drafter, which maybe we'll talk about in this next point. But love this point, love the follow-up, Zach. Great concepts there. So let's talk about our final step that we're going to go through today, and then we'll get into some closing thoughts. Study the incoming rookie class and improve the draft capital situation as much as possible pre-draft. Zach, you touched on it before. You might not be able to add a ton of picks in this class, but you might be able to upgrade them. And that might be a good way to get rid of some of the roster cloggers you have, some of the aging vets you have. You might be able to to trade up some of these deals, because if I'm bringing on an aging vet in the offseason, I feel a heck of a lot better about it if I'm getting a draft pick with them. So a good way to do that, you could not inchworm your way up the board, but make a possible pretty significant increase up the board, because you are sending some youth along with that asset. And hopefully it's not like the 411 being sent with Stephon Diggs to get to the first round. You might be able to do that in all fairness, but hopefully it's a little better pick, something a little more enticing, a little more exciting, whatever it may be. But ask yourself, do you need more draft capital that I could still get out of this class? Can I trade up to improve my current positioning? Should I trade down to pad my future draft capital if I'm kind of kicking to next year anyway? Can I do that? Do I have another big question to ask? Do I have too much draft capital in this class where I don't have enough roster space to roster everybody? So do I need to consolidate anyway? And maybe that's where you get to once you start the fire sale. Maybe you have a ton of picks that you don't really have a ton of homes for, because you have pieces, you've been playing the waiver wire, you've been able to get some players on your team. It's not a super deep bench, so you have players on the waiver wire worth adding, some stashes, whatever it may be. So do I have to, maybe make some trades to consolidate? Maybe you have to roll over picks to next year. Maybe I can improve my 201 to be a 25 first. Maybe I can improve my 301 to be a 25 second to re-roll next year and get some benefit on my end, because I'm waiting a year to make that pick now. So that's just some things to think about. And then, kind of tying into what we talked about before, again, what do future years look like? How do our future draft picks look like? And how do we kind of, wrap it all together at the end of this? You talk about this a good bit when we get into draft season, about knowing the strengths and weaknesses of the class. Just as important now as it is to learn next year. Right now, just an example, the quarterback class next year doesn't look great. There's going to be question marks coming out next year. So maybe this is the year to maybe put a little more focus on quarterback, or, have the realistic expectation in mind that you're probably not going to be able to draft quarterback as reliably as you could this year, next year. That's just something to think about. But Zach, talk about this point as we're rebuilding. talking about the incoming rookie class, improving draft capital situation as much as we can. What do you got here?
Yeah, I mean, knowing the strengths and weaknesses of future draft classes is so important, and it's very hard to do that the further you go out. Like,
Right.
we can't really have an honest discussion about the 2026 draft class.
Right.
You can start to get into the silhouette framework of what the 2025 draft class will look like, but right now we're still figuring out where the strengths and weaknesses of the 2024 draft class are. Look, I know what Mike says about this running back class. It's not strong just because other players got their values bumped up because others didn't come out in this class doesn't make this a strong running back class. It is a weak running back class. And if you were waiting for 2024 to finally address your running back position, man, that sucks. That really, really sucks. And, it was hard to know that, what was it? Was it Travion Henderson and was it Raheem Sanders? Travion didn't come out. Raheem Sanders didn't look as good as we thought 8-12 months ago. Those are things that are hard to project, but, we can start to look at those things in November, December, January, that the 2024 rookie running back class is not where you want to be filling in the blanks to your running backs on your roster. It is very important to know that. Yeah, and it's just knowing how you can use that information to fill in the frameworks of your roster. Because again, if you were waiting for this draft class to fill out the running back position, you're going to have to pivot. Because I know, listen, we love Bucky Irving. We love Braylon Allen. We love Jonathan Brooks. None of those are guaranteed to give you what you're going to need at a starting running back position. But to depend on that week one, big mistake. Big mistake. So knowing the strengths, knowing the incoming draft classes, knowing that next year is not great at quarterback, knowing that this year, after the first two tight ends, I know Bob likes some guys, but it's still a little icky right now. Oh. It's important to know that. So we're going to have to pivot. And it's important to know that. Like, the sooner you know that information, the better.
It's more about how you adjust to what the class ends up being versus trying to make more of the class than what it is. So I agree with all these points. Wrapping this up now, getting into the final bits of discussion here. At the end of the day, there's only so much we can do at any one time with rebuilds, and we've acknowledged that these are going to take some time, and these are just kind of the steps to go through. We'll probably run out another one of these after the NFL draft, after your rookie drafts. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you're subscribing if you're new, if you're not subscribed already, so you don't miss it when that does come out. But at the end of the day, like I said, there's only so much we can do at any one time. But hopefully this discussion has provided a roadmap to attack your next rebuild, whether it's an orphan, whether, like I said, you're just deciding, man, I need to get this team right. And if you want to do that with us, hit up, patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind, get in the Discord, or take a look at roster reviews, details all in the description box below. But Zach, before we get out of here, any closing thoughts you have on rebuilds, discussions, anything we went over today that you want to touch on?
Yeah, just again, managing expectations is the most important thing with orphan takeovers. If you're expecting to, compete year one, most likely not going to happen unless you I've seen it happen, but the chances are slim. That's not the model of consistency that we're trying to preach, because that can set you even further back, right? The way I'm a little bit more conservative in my approach, and it works for me because I build a contender. You can never guarantee championships. Never. There are too many wild card X factors. But if I can be in a competitive frame for 3 to 5 years, that is always what I am striving towards in every one of my dynasty leagues. Can I be a playoff team for the next 3 to 5 years? Because anybody can win in the playoffs any season in fantasy.
Yeah, I like that. You give yourself more chances in the anything can happen, the pants off, dance off, as we like to call it around here at the Dynasty Rewind, the playoffs, that being, and getting your legs under you and giving yourself that much flexibility to, when you go to make competitive moves, not drain your entire asset pool, because you've built up so much over the previous years when you're rebuilding correctly and putting in the time and effort to really build. I don't want to throw juggernaut out there because it's too, I don't know, cliche, I guess, but building a team that is very competitive and has assets to back them up when the road gets a little rocky, when you have injuries come out of nowhere, when you have a guy that's just not playing well, when maybe a guy declines early, whatever the case is, whatever happens, you have ammo in the bank to make up for that once you get out of the rebuild. And that's a whole nother discussion to talk about. But while that is it for this video, I do hope that y'all enjoyed. Please leave a like if you did. Comment down below your thoughts on the video itself, and let us know what you're looking to do if you're a rebuilding team at this point in the offseason. Additionally, if you want us to take a look at your team, me or Zach, we will do that for you. Take a look at the pinned comment below or the YouTube description box. Check out the one-time submission roster review link and go from there. And if you want 24/7 advice on how to rebuild your team anytime, any day, check out patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. Get in that Discord server. Try it for free on us for 1 week in the $1 or $5 tiers. Check out some bonus podcasts as well while you're there. But with all that said and all the promo in the books, that's going to be it for us today. We will see you in the next one. But until then, I hope that y'all have a good one.